Molasses is here. Bip Solar Bear is here. Wonderful. Thanks so much. I get 2 people video. Wonderful. Hey, anyway, I'm TC. This is the MBRR podcast. It's a drive time dialectic, and you guys have seen the title. I'll get to it in just a few minutes here as we wait for people to show up. If you're watching and you would like to support the channel, please share this out, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't, check the bell icon for notifications to make sure you are getting notifications when I do go live. And as always, if you like what you're hearing and you want to toss me a super chat or a super sticker, I'll always be down with that. And if you really like what you're hearing, which of course you should, because I mean, what's not to like? It's me, most likable, easily, as I say, I'm the most likable person on the planet. One of my viewers drop out. That's ironic, but anyway, yeah. So like the video, share the video, and head over to the memberships and pick a membership level and help me grow the endeavor. And when I say grow the endeavor, I'm talking about help me reach more people through different means, and I will be most appreciative. I wanted to let you guys know that I was going to be sitting down for an interview, of the very first video broadcast interview with Mrs. Rebecca Whiting, who's a senatorial candidate for the is going to be moving through my area, and I do not want to screw up this very first chance at sitting down with Rebecca to talk about why she's running for Senate against Amy Klobuchar and whoever the Republicans end up pulling through their primary. Right now, Royce White, some of you have seen the video that I did on Royce White, my perspective on him. But right now, Royce White is the endorsed candidate, but several other people are still running in the primaries against Royce. And there's a lot of concerns with all of them, quite frankly, that are running for the Republican nomination. Oh, forgive me, guys. I'll be yawning in front of you. Just got off work. It's been a little warm and muggy today. Just a titch warm and muggy from Minnesota. And so I was going to sit down with Rebecca tonight, and we were going to talk about her campaign and why she's running and what makes her the best candidate for office. I have an invite out to Royce White. Numerous to him through Twitter and said, hey, TC's challenged you to come on his show. And Royce White has not if Amy Klobuchar wants to talk to her, but I'm not reaching out to her. So yeah, anyway, I will not have a warmonger on at my invite. I might allow them platform time to come on and get grilled, but we know that's not going to happen. So yeah, tune in on Thursday night. Rebecca and I have rescheduled. I will be her first sit-down video interview since she found out that the Secretary of State has allowed her on the ballot magnanimously, and we'll be having a little bit of a conversation about ballot access as part of her conversation with me on Thursday night, and that'll be at 8 p.m. Central. So now that I've gone through that, I've gone through the shilling and told everybody to go over and join my channel. Hey Chris, thanks for stopping in. And everybody else who's watching, just throw up a hi so I know who's here. And I will greatly appreciate it. And because I like to give shout outs, that's why I do these drive time dialectics. This isn't just me talking to you, it's me interacting with you as best as possible. So I have a confession to make, and it's not going to come as a surprise. I mean, most of you know what I did for a living. Hey, Chad. Let's see, Bip Solar Bear, hello. You say a literal hi. Most of you know what I did for a career for almost 13 years, from 2009 to basically 2024 with the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office. No surprises there. Everybody knows I was a deputy. Everybody knows I was in a detention center and working as a sworn deputy inside the detention center. I took the same oath as a road deputy did. Exactly the same oath as a road deputy. My involvement in the law enforcement world is different. Hey, BCNN is here. Yes, always film the police. That's absolutely correct. Whether you're interacting with them or not, if you have the opportunity, always film the police. But as I said, that's what I did. I was a deputy in the detention center. Philosophically, I've always been, whether I knew it or not, I've always been conservative paleo libertarian. And as I said in the blue line scales fall off my eyes video and some of that other content related to that, I started very early in my career with the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office to really start to have concerns about the nature of the justice system, but in particular about the nature of the law enforcement world and what I saw them as being willing to do. And I really began to see the intentional, willful malfeasance of the law enforcement career field, the institution of policing. I really started to see their willful malfeasance and being more than willing to look the other way when they observed, when an officer or a deputy or a trooper observed one of their own members of the blue line career field doing something that was patently and demonstrably wrong. And there's talks about the nepotism within it, the good old boys club, and we hearken back to the days of the 1950s and before, or the 60s, or even in the 70s, where everybody knew the local cop, and it was kind of a given that if you knew the local cop, you weren't going to get in trouble for certain things. I think about, I haven't talked about this a lot, but my dad was an alcoholic, and he did not drive sober at all, probably for a good 4 years. I bet it was 4 years that man did not drive sober at all. And when I look back on it now and I think about how he drove, the speeds that he drove at, and the way that he was driving, with my brother and I in the car, in the vehicle, almost always, he had this, I think it was a 1976 Scottsdale. And that thing would pass anything on the road but a gas station. I'll tell you what, that for a pickup, that thing would haul ass. But Andrew Ho says 10 viewers seems fishy. I don't know. I'm happy if I have 2. So I don't know why 10 viewers seems fishy, but maybe you can explain for us, Andrew, why that seems fishy. But anyway, when I look back on it, if my dad had been doing that today, he would have gotten arrested for sure. But we would hear stories back then of how the local cop would, maybe see somebody driving a little crazy, and they'd follow them home, make sure they got home safe. And I don't necessarily think that's all that bad idea, especially if a person's really close to home, there's a way to intervene and help that person without ruining their lives. Now, I have a very dim view on drunk driving, an incredibly dim view on drunk driving or driving under the influence of alcohol. I've seen up close and personal, to some regards, what it looks like when people drive under the influence and how much hurt and pain and damage that it can do. But if an officer were to do that for your average person on the street today, it would be terrible for that officer, and rightly so. Like, you just don't have the authority and the discretion in those situations when somebody's driving in a situation like that to just ignore it because maybe you like them. And so we have this mentality that police nepotism, police covering for friends and whatnot, all happened years ago, but it doesn't happen anymore. And I'm not going to say that about this group. I know that the vast majority of people that watch my stuff would say, I don't see it that way. But that's the way when you look at most people who are in that back to blue at all cost mentality. They think that police accountability is higher than it's ever been, and nobody does anything that could possibly get them in trouble. But we've got video out there of that not being true. In fact, a friend of mine just showed me a video before I started this of a cop who just stupidly pulls an attractive young lady over, and she says, "Hey, what if I show you these?" And he goes, "Look, I can look up tits, on the internet anytime." She goes, "But can you touch them? Because if you could touch these if you want." And he, like an idiot, he touches her breasts on the side of the road. And the person in the vehicle with her, or either a dash cam or somebody in there, had the camera on him groping her breasts on the side of the road. And he rightfully was removed and charged for that, because she, even if she wanted it, couldn't consent. Even though she was trying to bribe him, she can't consent to that because of the position of power that he has. And we see that play out in law enforcement over and over and over again. We see it play in the prison industrial complex over and over and over again. Men and women, male detention staff and female detention staff, literally going to prison for a very, very long time for having apparently consensual sexual relations with individuals that they're responsible for overseeing, because that's just not allowed with that position of authority. And I shouldn't say over and over and over again, because it happens a lot more than people understand, a lot more than people recognize, and people get away with it a lot. And my confession that I have to make is not about me, by the way. I don't, in that regard, the confession I have to make is that I saw a lot of stuff as my eyes were opening to how terrible the willingness to cover up for your fellow blue line, if you will, really was. I turned a blind eye a lot of times because I thought it's not my place. It's not my job to say something. That's somebody else's job. That's a supervisor's job. That's a sergeant's job. That's a captain's job. That's a lieutenant's job. It's whoever. It's somebody else above me, their responsibility. And I was a field training officer for over half of my career. Literally for over half of my career. And I understood how important it was to hold trainees accountable. That was my job. If I saw them do something that was out of line, like really out of line, I would go to the training and compliance division and say, look, I don't think this person can work here. In fact, I think they need to not work here, or this is going to take a lot longer than you would imagine. But I saw things at times that I always trusted somebody else was going to cover, that somebody else was going to take care of, and I regret that today. The Rochester Police Department had an officer. His last name was Burhani, And I think you can look him up in Rochester, Minnesota news outlets. But we would joke about this guy for years about how every one of his DUI arrests took place at the exact same nightclub, at the exact same spot by the nightclub. And worse, it was always an attractive blonde or, you know, something like that. And we just knew when Burhani was working, you could count on at least, especially on a weekend, like a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, when we would be on duty, you would say, okay, Burhani's here working this weekend for RPD. How many hot chicks is he gonna bring in? And I would joke about that too. Until people I was acquainted with, she got arrested by Burhani, and she was an attractive young lady. And now she admitted she was driving under the influence. She shouldn't have been doing that. But it was a track record for him. It was a pattern. It was, if you will, it was his modus operandi. It was how he operated. He watched this particular club, and hello, Austin, and hello, Elva Caro. Thanks for stopping in. And he would wait for the ones that got into a car by themselves. He would observe them as they walked. He would observe them as they pulled away. And if they showed any variation, he would pull them over. And this young lady and her husband, who there again I knew for a long time, would consider them good acquaintances, you know, friends on some level, reached out to me afterwards, and they told me, hey, look, this cop has said some really inappropriate things to her and is trying to reach out to her. And I said, you gotta turn that in. You've got to turn that in. And eventually it was reported that, you know, Burhani was reported and complaints were filed, and he was removed from his position. I don't know where he is to this day. I really don't know what happened to him. But one of my regrets is like, instead of like sitting around making jokes about the fact that he was always bringing in hot chicks, I should have been asking harder questions. And, you know, Elva Carl says it's hard for cops to go against the grain. And even though I wasn't law enforcement on the streets, I was still a deputy in that detention center, and it was hard. Even, you know, and everybody's like, oh, well, you speak out all the time. It takes a lot for most people, and I watched and got pushed. And I have talked about a couple of incidences of individuals, right, you know, in the last couple of years before I ended my career through my podcast with the sheriff's office, I talked about a couple of occurrences that should not have happened, that were brushed under the rug. One of them was a Deputy Wallachroth who tased an individual for passively non-complying with being told to leave his cell because they were going to do what's referred to as a shakedown. And policy and procedure, an electronic interruption device is not on a person who is non-threatening. And this person was just laying on their bunk. Move. And this Deputy Wallachroth tased this individual and removed from duty. He was put on an administrative leave, but instead of being terminated or even charged for excessive use of force, in his position as a deputy, he was allowed to retire with his full pension and all of his benefits and throw in a retirement party. And then in another case of a deputy who still works for the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office, I've told his story before. He got drunk during a training meeting on Zoom during the COOF pandemic. And he was being an ass to the trainer. He got summoned in for a meeting with the chief deputy in charge of detention services, Brian Howard, and Brian put him out on administrative leave after that meeting because this deputy showed up under the influence of alcohol to the meeting, which means he drove to the meeting. He drove from his home to the meeting at the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office detention center in the office with the chief deputy. He was under the influence driving there. He was under the influence for the meeting, and instead of arresting him and charging him for driving under the influence, the chief deputy drove him home, put him out on administrative leave so that he could go and get help for his alcoholism on the dime of the county. And when I say the county, what I'm talking about are the wage slaves who are taxed to hell and back. And that deputy barely got a slap on the hand. There was no discipline for him. He was protected. That brings us to how they protected Deputy Matt Adamson when he was turned in for attempting to meet with underage girls for sex in exchange for alcohol in May of 2022, and wasn't finally arrested by accident until November of 2023. So a year and a half. They did nothing, even though they knew that he had been accused of this and there was evidence to show that he was doing this. They didn't do anything. Now, where's that bring TC in this? What people have to understand is I worked in a maximum security facility. I worked in a facility that was tightly controlled. You didn't get in or out of that place without one set of eyes observing you from the master control post, because they opened the doors. And so one evening, a Rochester Police Department officer, I think it was a supervisory officer actually, showed up with a ride-along, a female ride-along. And if I remember correctly, this female ride-along was either his wife or his girlfriend. And he gets to the elevator, and even the elevator was secured. The only way the elevator would operate was as a master control operated. And said, "Hey, I'm coming down with a ride-along. I'm here to talk to an interview such so-and-so." And this was in the evening. Now, it's a little weird. It's just a weird occurrence that they're conducting an interview with somebody who's in custody on a week, basically, just not normal for a normal street cop to be doing an interview with someone who's already in custody. And that really raised some red flags for me. And then doing it with a ride-along. And then they got this detainee, called him out of his housing unit, and instead of having him in an interview room, they had him sitting in a side room where they closed the door. And it was the officer and his ride-along and this male detainee. And I'm like, there's something wrong about this. And I realized that the officer was in a relationship with the female detainee. And the female detainee was the mother, or the female ride-along, excuse me. The RPD officer was in a relationship with the female ride-along. They were significant others. And then she was the mother of the male detainee that they were there to interview. Now, some of you are going, what's the big deal? Folks, that's a major breach of security. Massive breach of security. And then to be sitting in a room where they can have direct contact, and everybody's just trusting this, and they're like, well, like he just got to ride along, and they're just doing an interview. And I said something, and I said, Sarge, I'm pretty sure that this is wrong. I'm almost 180% positive that there's something going on here. I'm pretty sure that's the detainee's mother. And we have a massive breach of security. No one searched her. No one went through her belongings. No one went through her items. We don't know, was she passing anything on? Everybody's like, well, come on, a cop's not going to do that. A cop's not going to let this woman bring this stuff in, bring things in that she's not supposed to have. Well, you would think that a law and order cop, right? You would think that a cop is also not going to do a massive breach of security and let his significant other come along as a ride along and then have contact, the ability to have physical contact with her offspring under the guise of interviewing him about a case. It was all a lie. I would think they formulated this plan. We talk about conspiracy. They conspired to allow this mother to come in and have the privilege of seeing her detained son when no one else, in a physical visit, face to face, literally right there in the same room, sitting on chairs next to each other. No one else gets that privilege. But this cop got that privilege through conspiracy for his significant other to see her son when no one else would get that. That alone is wrong, and it's an abuse of the position of their authority and their power. That alone, on its own, is wrong. You could say what you want about me, say you're overreacting or whatever, but folks, you try that in any other career field. When you know you're not supposed to be doing something, and then look at your boss and go, well, hey boss, but it's me, come on, it's me. Like, what's the big deal? Right? That's how people are gonna look at it. And they're like, you can't do that. But yet here we have the cop doing that. The cop doing it and getting away with it. And I'm calling something like, Sarge, I'm like, somebody's got to say something. Somebody's got to do something. And, to his credit, Sergeant's like, I'll address that with him. But nothing ever happened. And I don't know that it was ever reported. And it bothered me then, and it's bothered me ever since, quite frankly, because I felt then and I feel now like a hypocrite. Like I should have been more responsible. I should have said more. I should have done something. But what I want you guys to understand is this isn't uncommon. This happens all the time in that world. It happens constantly. And it's observed constantly. We could see people doing things that they're just patently not allowed to do, that it's just wrong for them to do. And it could bother us. But in the law enforcement world, you could see somebody doing something that's a violation of policy, that's a violation of U.S. code, that's a violation of state statutes, it's a violation of use of force requirements the continuum. You could see these things. You could see people, you could see officers abusing those, and you don't say anything. And when you finally do get around to speaking out, then, as many of you will recognize, they find a way to get rid of you. They will get rid of you. They cannot have anybody bucking the system. And when you violate a person's natural rights in front of another officer, when you violate a person's constitutionally enshrined rights, and the other officers don't say anything but actually go along with it and say, hey, look, this isn't my issue, I'm just here, I'm following the directions of my sergeant, of my lieutenant, my captain, the chief, the sheriff, whatever. What they're telling you is I know this is wrong, but I'm not going to say anything about it because my job is more important, and I feel like shit that was me. I wasn't responsible for this Rochester Police Department officer bringing his significant other into the facility. I didn't plot that with them. I, to some degree, did what I could do in the moment, but I didn't follow up. I didn't go, hey, I'm going to go talk to the sheriff. I'm going to make sure that this is actually addressed. I just shut my mouth about it. Just like everybody who witnessed Deputy Wallachroth tase a passively non-compliant individual they talked about it amongst themselves, but they didn't file any formal complaints. And I called, after I left the employee of the sheriff's office, I called a local newspaper and I said, here's a story for you to cover. And they said, well, we'll check into it. And then they got back to me. There's nothing there. Nothing we can do about it now. And it's the same thing with this deputy that drove drunk. Drove under the influence of alcohol. John Bondi, Deputy John Bondi of the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office, was given tacit permission to drive drunk by the chief deputy when the chief deputy took him home, made sure he got home safely, put him out on paid administrative leave, and then let him go to treatment on taxpayer dime. Nobody said, wait a minute, why wasn't he charged? At least for driving. If you can get him for a DWI, there's got to be something else you can get him for. Reckless endangerment, something? Nope, nothing. Nothing in the paper. No name in the paper, like everybody else. And I feel like shit that I didn't follow up in the case of this Rochester Police Department officer bringing a significant other down to see her son and violating all of the security protocols of the facility. I just imagine how shitty it would have been if she brought him drugs and he OD'd. Or she brought him something and he used it to hurt somebody. See, this crap happens all the time. And so many people out there, especially people who consider themselves patriotic, blue, red-blooded, back the blue at all times. Well, that's just a few. It's not, folks. It's not a few. It's the majority. Not that the majority are actively breaking the law, but that the majority will just turn a blind eye when your constitutional rights, when your natural rights are being violated, when you're being abused by the system, when it's your neighbor, your son, your daughter, your wife, your grandkids. They'll turn a blind eye when they see it happening, because it's not happening to them and they don't want to rock the boat because it's uncomfortable. They'll turn a blind eye. So don't tell me anymore about how the majority are good, because they're not. If you go watch my Defining a Good Cop series, I tell people, look, this is what a good cop is. And a good cop is not one who doesn't just actively abuse people physically, or one who doesn't actively abuse people sexually, or one who doesn't actively strip people of their constitutionally enshrined natural rights. A good cop is a person who speaks out when they see bad things happening or being done. That's what a good cop is. And sadly, there aren't many of them left, because they get rid of them when they can. And so I feel terrible. And then I think back, the thing that brought this to mind was my interaction with the mayor of Rochester when she came on my social media page and told me with the video that I put up last Friday, where I was talking about this young individual, concerned citizen, getting a phone call from the Rochester Police Department attorney telling her, you need to stop commenting on these things on social media without knowing everything. You should just call me instead if you have questions, instead of putting your thoughts out there on social media. You should go back and watch that video. In fact, I'll try and link it here. I put that video up on social media and I tagged the mayor, and she immediately, the third largest metro area in the state of Minnesota, she immediately came to my Facebook page and told me I was guilty of spreading misinformation and that I needed to stop. Folks, this shit happens all the time. It happens constantly. And as El Vaccaro is saying, in 2020, my neighbor, the governor called the mayor of Albuquerque and said, arrest Stephen Baca. There was no probable cause at the time. A few months later, he was pushed out of the department. You know, that's the, you know, officers will keep their mouths shut even when they know something is wrong. Because they don't want to be the guy that gets shot at the shooting range. They don't want to be the guy that loses their career. Because all they know is policing. And then a lot of them will walk away from their career eventually, and they will bear the brunt and the weight of that guilt of keeping their mouth shut for the rest of their lives. And there isn't a day that goes by where I don't kick myself for the times I kept my mouth shut. There's not a day that goes by where I don't feel like shit for the times I kept my mouth shut. So I'm gonna wrap it up here, folks. I'm gonna hit the treadmill, and once again, I'll say it again. I know I say it every time. If you're not a member, please consider heading over to the membership option and picking even the entry level. I would love the support. If you like the content, share it out. This has probably been one of the more transparent videos that I've done in a really long time, but I feel really crappy for the times I kept my mouth shut. And I appreciate all of you guys tuning in, and I would love if you would help me, you know, put the stuff out there so that people can see it. Insider views on this stuff are really important. And it's time for patriotic Americans to wake up and realize that, especially conservative small government types, you cannot be small government and then want a big strong police force. You just, those two things are mutually exclusive. And you're never going to reform law enforcement if you're not willing to call out the garbage. If you just close your eyes and say, well, that's just small cases. Because they're not just small cases, and it's not just a small handful. It's a lot more than you would ever imagine. And we are seeing more and more and more people being abused, even with body cams out there. We're seeing more and more and more abuse every day than I would even dream being possible. Shit's got to end. You can only push a small segment of society so far before they fight back. I don't know how else to say it. You can only push a small segment of society so far before they fight back. And I don't want it to get that far. I want reform, and I want reform now. And I'm terribly sorry for all the times I ignored. Tune in on Thursday night, folks. I'm going to be sitting down with a Minnesota candidate for Senate, running against Amy Klobuchar, and whoever the Republicans put up. Her name is Rebecca Whiting, and she is a war vet, combat war vet during the global war on terror. She has seen the crap, and she has some really, really strong positions and views. She is the best candidate in the state of Minnesota right now. So tune in on Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central, barring weather conditions. She was supposed to be on tonight, but we rescheduled. But she is well worth listening to and sharing out. And once again, head over to the membership channels if you haven't yet. Pick a membership, sign up, support the channel, support everything that we're doing. That we're doing this together. Support what we're doing. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. If you have subscribed, make sure you're getting notifications by clicking on that bell icon. And if you'd come back and comment on the channel, on the video afterwards, I would really appreciate it. And then if you would help share this out, because I really think that people, especially your conservative, back the blue at all costs friends, really need to hear this. And I don't, like I said 1,000 times, I don't do what I do. I don't say the things I say because of what it gets me, right? Because it cost me my career. Small favors, right? It cost me my career. Hey, Tav, thanks for stopping in. You're going to want to go back and watch the rest of it afterwards. Don't ever let anybody tell you cops don't make good money, because trust me, I know how good they actually get paid. I was just a detention deputy, and I lost 75% of my income when I lost my career over my channel. So I'm well aware of how good cops get paid. So I don't do this for myself, and I don't do this because I can save anyone. I do this so that we can reach people together. That's why I do it the way I do it. It's so that we can reach people together. Because that's what matters the most to me. It's us reaching people together. And each one of us has a different story to tell. And each one of us has a different way of telling that story. And each one of us has a different job in this movement. And as Elva Carl says, I'm afraid it might be too late on some situations. It's not what I want, but it's what it is. But if we can pull it back from the brink, I would be very happy. So, friends, once again, thank you for tuning in. Share it out. And until next time, I love you guys. Thanks for all your support. Thanks for viewing and all that. Fight for your freedom, it is yours. Fight for your liberty, it belongs to you. And say it with me, because I know most of you know it. Sic semper tyrannis.